Love leave time for questions if we can. So, welcome everyone to this foundational wellness webinar. A look at some thoughts behind exiting our very pervasive symptomatic approach to wellness. And many of you know that right now, because of my travels and retreats and different things, I work a lot virtually. And still, even though I work, I would say, very much outside of the system or, the quote unquote system, I'm still seeing so many things that still resemble a symptomatic approach. Let me hop back just a second. For those of you who don't know me, whom I haven't met yet, my name is Dr. Molly Kaufman. I'm a doctor of acupuncture and Chinese medicine. I've been practicing medicine for 16 years. I'm also a yoga and meditation instructor and essential oils specialist. I definitely have always been a black sheep from the very beginning when I was applying to medical school in the United States, where I grew up and I was doing genetic and dermatological research. I was volunteering because I was the scientifically oriented one. I was also the representative in the hospital when family members were admitted because I could stomach. I have a lot of English teachers, lawyers in my family tapestry, so I was the designated one. And fortunately, I will say, unfortunately, because being a black sheep is not the easiest and most direct path, but very fortunately, being exposed to so much in the modern model early on in my life made it really clear to me that that was not the way that I wanted to engage as a healer, as a facilitator, as a teacher, as an educator. And so I've really dedicated my life the last decade, also leading international retreats, to helping people reweave the integrity of the story. It's kind of a nice way to describe it. Of course, as a doctor of traditional Chinese medicine, inherent in our medicine, and if you were on the webinar yesterday, an intro to Chinese medicine, you heard and got to see all about how holistic that tradition really is. And not everyone wants to choose traditional Chinese medicine. And I think we are in a very distinct moment in human evolution where we realize our approaches, and I would say for the last couple of decades, are actually leaving us more sick instead of more well. And so we're moving, we're going back to the drawing board, so to speak, and there's a huge push, as there should be, back toward nature. But even with natural remedies, what I'm seeing, and we'll take a look at it today, is still a very symptomatic approach, meaning we're not really looking at the entire picture of someone's story to understand better and more poignantly how we can facilitate that individual back to a state of health. And it's really across the board. Maybe some of you have heard of these different psychedelic experiences and Amazonian medicine. I've been involved with Amazonian medicine for the last decade, and even there, I have to say, I've witnessed so many times going for an intensive weekend retreat, and you see someone come and they have an aha moment, but they go back and they don't have any way to integrate that aha moment into the elements of their lives, and then you see them 6 months later arriving back to dive back in with the medicine, sort of in the same place they were the first time that you met them going in, because there isn't integrity in much that we're doing. And so hopefully the information today, some of it is going to be familiar to some of you, but the idea here is really just to whet your appetite and get you thinking about ways that you can begin to be a better advocate for your own well-being and also feel good about taking responsibility for your well-being, because at the end of the day, there isn't anyone coming to save us. And at the end of the day, while we might be waiting for the higher ups or the hierarchies to make decisions on our behalf, every single day is a day that we can choose on behalf of ourselves. And if we don't start there, I believe that we're not really going to make it too far. So this picture I've used in a couple of my courses, but I've really come to love it. And here, as we apply it to like, how are we going to get out of this symptomatic model and what's going on for us? It's quite great because on the left-hand side, we're breaking things into bits and pieces and still hoping that something good happens for the whole. But when we don't look at the whole, nothing good is going to happen for the whole because everything is constantly in relationship. And this is kind of what we're confronting here, just put a band-aid on it. And I'm never going to say that modern medicine and Western medicine is bad. There are some incredibly wonderful and necessary tools that modern medicine brings to us. And a lot of what's happening here in this photo is a superficial approach to things. And I'm sorry if you can hear the bell. I'm in Greece and I'm right next to a church, so you might get to celebrate the Sunday bells along with me. But, things like processed foods and synthetics, we know that they are affecting us negatively. We don't necessarily have educational places that we can go to understand how and to what depth and how to untie that ball of yarn, but also things like antibiotics, antidepressants, very symptomatically based and actually just covering up the signals and signs that our body and our mind and our spirit are giving us to let us know something is out of order. Instead of digging in and figuring out why and what and how and what is the origin, we're like, we need to be a little comfortable and we need to do that really fast. And so here's a medication to make it all better so you can keep living your life. And again, we know now, I would say without a doubt, that that model is not leading us into a good place. But let's start with the positive. So you were born with a body that with the right elements, tools, and circumstances know how to heal. And I always love to remind everyone that your body really is a superhero. You were born, your birthright is harmony. Now, that harmony is going to look different for every individual because every individual, one, has a different constitution, a slightly different biochemistry. And because we know the nature versus nurture story is both, and very poignantly both, how you grew up, where you grew up, what you chose to do, what you chose not to do, all of these things are going to influence where you've arrived in this moment. And your body is always working on your behalf. And there's a little bit of demonization, right, of symptoms these days. I feel like there's a big mindset around like my body's sabotaging me, or, oh, it's, not doing this right or not doing that right. But more often than not, it really is your body trying to do its best to keep up with the demands that you're giving it. So we have the liver, which is a detox organ, the colon, which is absorbing important nutrients. It houses the microbiome. So it's making enzymes. That's where 70% of your immune system is. So you literally have a superhero in your immune system that's battling all the bad guys all of the time without you asking it to do it. Your body is really a superhero. And what I would add to this slide probably is epigenetics. So we know now without a doubt as well, because science can back up the holistic tradition's understanding of epigenetics, which is changing how your genes express. We know that when you change your diet, it can alter how your genes are expressing themselves. When you alter what medications you're taking, it can alter, and also neuroplasticity. There's no certainty even in the brain, even in the control tower. We know now that we can shift and change neuroconnections, break negatively oriented ones, rebuild positively ones throughout the entirety of our lives. So you are actually a superhero because you're comprised of all of these different elements. And in fact, as I was alluding to, many diseases that we have now are normal responses to abnormal circumstances, right? Our body was not built to tolerate alcohol as a social paradigm. Right? The liver does its best to keep up, but we all know, I feel like, whether you've made a change or not at this point, we all know that there's a certain point at which the liver just starts to disintegrate if we are taking alcohol because we're somehow conditioned to think that that is what makes us socially acceptable, right? And things like IBS that Western medicine doesn't know anything about. Something like high cholesterol. High cholesterol isn't a disease. It's the result of a disease process. But in the symptomatic model, what we do is we say, "Ooh, your cholesterol's a little high. Here's a cholesterol medicine." But what we're overlooking, especially with that particular example, is that cholesterol is actually the foundation of many of the hormones in your body. And medications don't distinguish between which cholesterol, like where in your body it's suppressing it, right? And no one is often looking at why is your body producing too much cholesterol, which would be something that helps to kind of get us out of the symptomatic model. And so many diseases, again, are just our body doing their thing, like chronic inflammation. The inflammatory response is there to protect us. But if we don't change the circumstances within which our body became inflamed, the body will keep creating inflammation. And we know that that leads to so many different diseases down the road. And so it's not just about subduing the inflammation and limiting the inflammation. It's also, and obviously, I'm not talking about if you've sprained your ankle, right? This is a different thing, but I'm really talking about chronic systemic inflammation and where that leads. Just a couple numbers for you to try on. 85% of current healthcare spending is related to management of preventable diet-related chronic disease. 85% of the money that's being spent is related to managing people who are in a diseased state that didn't need to be in a diseased state. To me, that is stunning. Also, that 80% of chronic disease and premature death could be prevented by many just little lifestyle things that again are like the way that we feel like we need to tolerate life, the soothing nature of smoking, again, alcohol, being physically active or feeling, too like not enough energy to be physically active, dietary things. Dietary things are always at the foundation. We're going to get there too. But so much of this really preventable and curable at the end of the day through looking at the entirety of the human being and all of the things that the human being is interacting with rather than just the symptoms. So, what are the abnormal circumstances? Well, one, as a physician, so I'm not a medical physician, I'm a traditional Chinese medical doctor, but everybody takes an oath, right, that says do no harm. Except for that, in our symptomatic approach with pharmaceuticals, because those pharmaceuticals are not addressing root cause things, they're really, in most cases, intended to subdue or quiet or hide uncomfortable symptoms. We know that many of those pharmaceutical drugs that are commonly prescribed and commonly taken unknowingly, right? There's like an innocence also amongst people because a lot of this information is not being given in a comprehensive or cohesive way. But a lot of these medicines, unfortunately, are doing a lot of harm because not only are they not curing the problem, right? They're subduing symptoms, but they are not addressing the actual problem. But they have so many damaging side effects. And things like thyroid disorders, boy, I am meeting so many more women, more and more and more, that are being diagnosed with hypothyroidism, with low thyroid. Now, there are so many associations here, gut health, liver health, really pivotal in the thyroid story. But when you get put on thyroid medication, you have about a year and a half, maybe to 2 years before you can no longer ever get off that medicine again. Luckily, some of these interventions are reversible with an intelligent approach, but there are some that once you go on, and it's a real disservice, unfortunately, that the modern medical system is doing, it burns the organ's ability to ever recuperate its natural function. And if we were intervening much sooner in most disease processes, we'd be able to avoid most of this altogether. And I'd like to say that most pharmaceuticals are created from isolated synthetic compounds. And these synthetic compounds might create, yes, an action in your body, right? It's recognized by your body and it stimulates the body to do something. We're hoping that it's something relatively good, but because they are synthetic compounds, they still have to be processed in your body as a toxin or a poison. And so we're starting to know with more certainty and with deeper understanding how most pharmaceuticals are incredibly damaging to the system, not only because they themselves are toxic inside your system, but we'll see in a minute that there's a commonality between all of these sort of abnormal circumstances. I'd love to pause here and just give you a lemon sorbet moment, right? Because it can start getting heavy. It's like, oh my God, like, wow, okay, there's a lot wrong in the world. There is a lot wrong in the world. But guess what? We're nature. The human being, you are nature, which is why your birthright, just like the birthright of nature, is harmony. It's just that we have gotten so far away from nature that a lot of the natural processes are no longer recognizable. But I love to just take a moment and like exhale and lower the shoulders from the ears that creep up, right? When you start thinking about all of this stuff and say, we're nature. And the closer we are willing to return to nature and natural cycles and natural interactions and covering our body with natural fabrics and abandoning all of these weird, funny pressures and conditionings about aesthetics and aging and, like all of this stuff, the more willing we are to return to nature, the easier it becomes. And actually, it kind of happens automatically that we're no longer looking at ourselves in bits and pieces, but understanding ourselves with an incredible depth from the deepest places in us to the highest vibrating spiritual places in us. So, this is an image that a colleague of mine used, and I loved it. So, I replicated it here. Another one of our abnormal circumstances is how we're nourishing ourselves. Now, we know that we're in a difficult moment because we've overworked the soil. We have expectations about what's going to be available at the grocery store, which means that food gets shipped from one side of a country to another, and not only in the United States, but now more and more all over the world. We're eating things that don't grow in the environment that we're living in. And what this all is leading to, so the image here is someone putting gas in their car. So imagine you have a car, if you don't, but a lot of people have cars or, like a moped or whatever, and you know that that car needs gasoline to go. But imagine that in this pump, you're putting water into your vehicle and then expecting it to go. Well, of course, not only is it not going to go, but you're probably going to damage it beyond repair. But guess what? We're doing the exact same thing with the choices that we're making as far as nourishment. And a lot of people are trying to be more and more attentive, but we also know that because of the depletion of nutrients in the soil, because again of the production of food and the irradiation of things as they're transported on trucks, most of us are, whether knowingly or unknowingly, putting some water in our gas tank. And then all of those little things, right? Like, oh, I'll just have a little bit of processed food, or I'll just have a little bit of sugar, or I'll just have a little bit more coffee. All of those littles actually add up over time to be really big and end up like a full tank of water in your tank. And this is contributing to a huge breakdown. And so here's some of the data. I believe this comes out of the United States, but I know across the board in the UK, really starting to trend in the same direction. We have a lot of nutrient deficiencies. And for many of the reasons that I already said, the food production industry, not eating locally, not eating seasonally, not choosing a plant-based diet, eating a lot of processed food, eating too much meat. Meat is not bad. I am a vegetarian. This is a personal choice for me. But in traditional Chinese medicine, we recognize all food categories as having qualities and, sort of like a time, place, and purpose. But we know across the board that we've been taught to think that protein equals meat. And we've also have these sort of lingering cultural influences that meat also equals abundance, and we're eating way too much. And we're destroying the planet because we're eating way too much and we're demanding way too much, needless to say, the waste. But so many things are lending themselves to us having tanks full of water and expecting our body to keep running. And then when it doesn't run, we shame ourselves, like, body, why are you, doing this to me? But no, not many of us are really looking deeply, and not only looking deeply, but really willing to say, okay, I understand what's going on here, and I'm going to make every effort, even if it means I have to learn new habits, new ways of living, new ways of being. I'm going to make every effort to alter this and shift the fulcrum back toward a place where my body is getting the appropriate nutrients. And another US statistic, only about 10% of adults are meeting the recommended daily amounts of fruits and vegetables. I do want to say, not to be unknowing in these statistics that we do have a lot of socioeconomic things, right? We have food deserts. We have places where literally people cannot buy produce. It's crazy societally. I happen to be, I'm going to say, an idealist, and I really believe that the more of us that can and are privileged to have the choice trend back in the right direction, that it will stimulate a chain effect and we will start to see policies changing faster and people getting into leadership that are actually healthy, right? Like we can't expect the people leading us to be healthy if we're not willing to say, stop drinking alcohol for a while to heal our liver, or stop drinking coffee because we know that it's affecting our adrenals, right? We can't have these expectations of society if we're not really willing to take responsibility for ourselves. So it really all does start at home. And again, that might feel heavy in a way, but I'd love to just give you another perspective. Like, how amazing is it that in any given moment you can choose differently, literally? Every single moment is one moment where you can make a different choice about anything, even any small part of it. And this to me feels exciting. And then another one of these contributing factors is toxicity. So this is another image that a colleague of mine used recently in a presentation. And again, I loved it. She's wonderful at metaphors. And this is like what happens when the trash man, right, doesn't show up. Well, what's happening to us is we know that our environment is inundated with toxic influences. Our personal care products, our shampoo, our cleaning products. If you're eating processed food or buying anything packaged, there are preservatives, things. This is all recognized as trash inside your body. And while the trash man inside your body, which is the liver, in assistance of the gallbladder, the colon, all of these ways that we try to detoxify our body. So they didn't not show up to work. They are showing up to work to the best of their ability every single day, but they're like buried in this dumpster because they can't keep up with the demands that we're giving by continually dosing and surrounding ourselves with toxic influences. And some of you have seen this statistic before, but I think again, it's pretty eye-opening that there are tens of thousands of chemicals being pumped into the system. Not many of them are tested, and those that are tested are shown to be neurotoxins, endocrine disruptors. So that's your hormonal system. They affect the immune system. So many negative effects. I haven't yet found one synthetic chemical study that has any benefits to the human condition. And so, as long as we continue to buy things and not do our due diligence in really thinking like, okay, I know things have trended in the wrong direction. And I know, that I want to do my best to first rid my kitchen of all the cleaning products that are toxic and replace them with natural things. If we don't start taking care of this as well, it's very difficult. And this gets into one of my favorite phrases right now, which is you can't heal in the environment that made you sick. We can't escape a lot of the toxicity in the world, unfortunately, because as these products are being produced, they're pumping toxins into the air. So most of us, right, have microplastics in our body. Most of us have some heavy metals in our bodies. We're breathing the air that is shared air all over the universe, right, the earth. And so there's some of it that right now is unavoidable, but there's a heck of a lot of it, and I would say the majority of it, that we can choose away from and create an environment within which our body can be healthier. And not only that, but again, looking to the natural world, a study by the FDA between 2007 and 2016 that looked at some supplements, right? Just go supplements. I'm an advocate for supplements, but I'm also an advocate here for doing your due diligence. And we have evidence that many supplements, I would say the majority of supplements sold on the market are synthetic. So remember, again, they might stimulate an action in your body, but they are still a toxic influence for your body. But because there's very little regulation, what we're finding is that often what it says on the label of the bottle is not even inside the bottle. So not only might you be peeing out the majority of what you think you're taking in, not only are you providing yourself with extra toxins to process, but it might be that what's inside the bottle isn't actually inside the bottle. So I partner with companies with whom I do deep due diligence. I look at all of the research, I look at the ingredients. Every client that I work with who is taking supplements, I ask them to send me the labels and I go through every label because I want to know, right? There might be other companies doing a great job out there, but one of the assets, I would say, of having sort of an ally in a holistic practitioner or a wellness expert who's really educated in wellness is that we can help do the due diligence so that when you are intelligently supplementing, you're actually getting things that your body can use. And then the last abnormal circumstance, and this is a huge one, is the emotional part of life. I feel like almost to an extreme that like when I interact with life, when I look around life, okay, I live my life in a different way. I shout my emotions from the treetops, maybe probably to an overdoing it extreme, but when I look around life, what I see is very little healthful emotional expression. And I feel like, too, somewhere along the lines, just like so many of these other topics, we've kind of demonized emotions, right? Like, don't be angry, don't worry, be happy, everything's okay. No, but it's okay. Like all of these ways that we also sort of symptomatically, I would say, approach and subdue and try to harness our emotional experience. But when you get right down to it, all an emotion is a response to life. And life is varied and life is changed. So one interaction makes you feel happy. Great. One interaction makes you feel frustrated. Express that frustration healthfully. One experience makes you feel a little angry or maybe sad, right? We've really lost not only the capacity to healthfully express our emotions, but the societal like tapestry within which we should be safe to do that. We have very few tools in our modern societies. And again, I think this is why people are like going for the intensive retreat in India and going for the ayahuasca ceremony because we're so subdued that we don't even know where to start. But we also know that when we suppress emotions, it has a physiological effect. And so you might be taking the most amazing multivitamin, bioavailable, broad spectrum, right? Something that you know is really nourishing your body from the foundation up. But if you are not simultaneously addressing the toxic influences in your life or the emotional well-being and mindfulness and awareness, right? These cultivations, then I'm going to say it might still be a little bit symptomatic. And what all of these things have in common is the microbiome, really and truly. Malnourishment, nourishment deficiencies, toxic overload, emotional suppression. What else was in there? I think those were the three major ones. All of these things create dysbiosis, disharmony in the microbiome. And yes, the majority of the microbiome lives in the gut and has to do with the digestive system, but you actually have a microbiome all over your body, which is why I love this image so much. So all of those things are damaging the microbiome. And what's really tricky then about the cycle that we've gotten into is that when we fall into dysbiosis, we now know that there is an intimate connection to so many of the diseases that we are diagnosing, from chronic inflammation to chronic allergies to IBS to thyroid disorders to liver disorders, all have some commonality, some piece that is oriented around dysbiosis or the microbiome. Now, where it gets tricky is that because all of the things that I just mentioned also affect the microbiome, more or less, the microbiome, right, gets deficient from toxic overload, pharmaceuticals, not eating correctly, suppressing your emotion. Then, because the microbiome is out of harmony, it is exacerbating all of the things that we're trying to suppress with pharmaceuticals. And you see where that's leading, right? It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy of just staying in a cycle where you need the pill because nothing is getting better. The pill is making the underlying foundation worse. And so it's a really tricky hamster wheel to get off of. And so that's why I've become really passionate about microbiome education. And in fact, many of the programs that I offer throughout the year are related to kind of kickstarting and regenerating the microbiome because it is really part of the foundation of everything. And here I'll just say what it really comes down to in the end, and this is something that I also think modern life does not assist us in pausing to look at, right? You can log on to Instagram or Facebook and you're going to have 1,000 different people telling you what to think and what is important and what, like what to prioritize and what, right? I mean, like for those of you that I can see, can you just nod your head? Like, yes, it's so easy. You could go through a day and have 100 different people tell you exactly what's right. 100 rights. At the end of the day, the only story that we should be worried about with regards to our well-being is like, what is it to us? What is life to you? What is important to you? Like, is it important to live 100 years, even if it means that you can't walk and you can't pick up your grandkids and you can't do anything, right, just to extend life? Or is it more important to you to have a quality of life that may last less long, but will enable you to continue to engage in life while you're alive in the ways that you want? These are important questions that I think we must start asking ourselves with more diligence and much more dedication. And I understand that they're not easy questions, and probably it's an evolution, right? Which is why I love bringing mindfulness also into all of the programs that I offer, because the idea is helping you little by little to sort of peel away the layers of influence and conditioning and mindset to really get deep down to the heart of what is it all about to you? What is health to you? What is quality of life to you? And when you start from that place, everything that you bring in is in alignment with where you are really wanting to go. So here I'd love to just give an example, and I know some of you have seen this graphic before, but it's a really great one because my goodness, the prevalence of chronic allergies is so high. I feel like every other person that I meet, I should have looked up the numbers before this presentation, but I didn't, but I can and I will now that I think about it. But boy, so many people with chronic allergies, and the majority of those people believe that it's just like, that's just how it is. I have allergies. I have allergies. Okay, so first of all, allergies are curable. Curable. Okay. But second of all, this is also a lot of what I'm seeing in the natural realm. And many of you know, as an essential oil specialist and someone who's working virtually with people, primarily these days, I'm incorporating essential oils a lot into my work because they are incredible, potent, amazing allies. However, we want to be careful that when we introduce them, they're a piece of the puzzle. So in this example, what someone has is seasonal allergies. And on the left side, this would be the typical, right, unknowing, hasn't had a webinar with Dr. Molly yet. So just like innocently unknowing, and someone says, oh, you take Claritin to make yourself more comfortable. Again, subduing those signals of the body, making ourselves comfortable momentarily. So we have seasonal allergies arrive. It causes inflammation because any immune response is an inflammatory response. We go to the pharmacy and we get Claritin or Zyrtec or something like that. It makes us feel better, but underlying it is creating dysbiosis. It is damaging your microbiome. And because we know that 70% of the immune system is oriented in the microbiome, that means that you are also damaging your immune system. So guess what? The next season where your allergies are going to arrive, they're going to arrive because you have just created a self-fulfilling cycle of keeping yourself in allergies. One of our most powerful symptomatic remedies for allergies is this combination of pure lavender, lemon, and peppermint. And whether you're on the webinar with me or listening to the recording here as well, just like supplements, I want to be really mindful to say that 85% of essential oils have been shown and tested to be synthetic or adulterated. So also, if you decide to incorporate essential oils into your life, or into your strategy, do your due diligence, reach out to someone who you know does their due diligence, reach out to me so that you can really get your hands on essential oils that are pure, and you will know that they will have the effect that we say that they can possibly have. But lavender, lemon, and peppermint are incredibly powerful antihistamine combination. You can take them internally, you can apply them topically, you can diffuse them. They're wonderful symptomatically, but guess what? No matter who you are, if you have allergies, it's a microbiome problem. And so you can use lemon, lavender, and peppermint for the rest of your life, and you might have symptomatic relief. But if you're really wanting to make your system healthy, you best have a side-by-side strategy that is also looking at your digestive health and your inflammatory response and the health of your microbiome. Do you see where how that looks symptom like it can really we can so easily, right, interject natural things and say like, "Oh, but I'm going natural," which is great and it's wonderful and I applaud you because that's one step in the right direction. But what we really want to do is exit the symptomatic model completely. And so be aware that when you're introducing things, albeit natural things, that you're really still looking at the big picture. And, we have a vibrant, beautiful online community where we have a private WhatsApp group so people can ask questions, right, whenever in doubt. And this is part of what I'm really trying to create and hold in honor of wanting to rewrite the narrative of wellness, of healthcare, of all of these things. I really want you to feel good because guess what? The better you feel, the better I feel, the better we all feel, the better the world's going to get. I know it. I believe it. It can be no other way, right? If you look around, you see we're not good. Human beings in general, most of us have some sort of sickness. We're not doing well mentally. We're not doing well emotionally. Look to the earth, also not doing that well. Everything is connected. So I really believe that once we just take that stance and say, okay, I got it. I got it. And I'm willing to have the courage to, right, fully exit the cycle. We also want to be careful that when you take that beautiful step to replace something that we know is damaging for the system, like an over-the-counter allergy medication, with something natural and beautiful like lemon, lavender, and peppermint, that we're simultaneously treating the root cause. Otherwise, we're still kind of playing the game of the symptomatic cycle. And so here's where we get to like, okay, how can we start acting? And I'm going to say, years ago, I would have never imagined that I would be such an advocate for supplements. I'm an herbalist. I work with acupuncture. I work with Chinese herbal formulas. I love herbal medicine. And because of all the reasons that I just described to you, in general, I don't know many people. In fact, I can't even think of one right now, including myself, because I'm a traveler, because of many different contributing circumstances in my life. I don't know one person who wouldn't benefit from a highly potent, bioavailable, whole foods based multivitamin. Why? Because in order for your body to do anything, it has to have the right vitamins and minerals and nutrients. And so we might say like, oh, I've got a liver problem or I've got a skin problem or, this, that, and the other thing. But if part of the strategy is not that nutritive part, almost everything else we do might work to some extent, but there's going to be a limitation because your cells need that full component of nourishment to do their superpower magic. Every organ needs the right component. Is that the right component of nutrients? Yes, thank you for giving me a nod. Sometimes I say the word so many times and then they start sounding foreign, even the words. Component of nutrients, right, to do the job that they're meant to do. And so most times when I'm working with people, this is the first step for me is to introduce a potent, bioavailable, whole foods, nothing synthetic, no fillers, right? Nutritive pack to give the body what it needs. And an example is I was just working with a client. She happens to be a nurse and a pretty spectacular little mini clinical trial. She had high cholesterol, and for 2 months, she went plant-based. The cholesterol didn't change a lot. We introduced one of the multivitamins that I work with a lot right now, and within 30 days, her cholesterol went down 30 points. It's not to say that going plant-based didn't help, but it is to say that, again, cholesterol is not a disease, right? It's the underlying thing that is creating too much cholesterol in the body. And so in order for the body to do what it's meant to do in harmony, by introducing those foundational level nutrients, you give the body exactly what it needs to answer any other call you might make to it. And the other really big factor for me, let me check. Okay, we're doing great. The other really big factor is that I think we need to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And I feel like this is talked about a lot, like, business coaches and self-help coaches, you gotta like lean into the pain and lean into the discomfort and this. But as a holistic health practitioner, I'm gonna say we need to do it everywhere. Because it's not that we want to be in a state where we don't feel anything. When your body gives you messages, that is the most intimate and divine type of communication that there is. That is your body saying, hey, I need help. Hey, can if you can feel this pain, can you pay attention to me? We have so many ways that, I say we, but like our body, even our spirit, when like words get caught in your throat, there are so many ways that our being is constantly trying to tell us what's going on. And our approach has become like, ooh, that doesn't feel that good, make it go away. Okay, I'm fine. Right? And again, that doesn't seem to be leading us in any good direction. And I'm not saying that I want you to experience suffering. I'm not saying that I want everyone to be uncomfortable all of the time. But when you start to get a cold, right, in an ideal world where we've exited the symptomatic model, when you begin to feel the first signs, right, maybe your skin gets a little funny or you feel that first chill, you're like, oh, maybe I'm coming down with something. And you begin to introduce elements to support the healthy functioning of your immune system, right? And what that is going to do is allow your immune system to process through whatever that is, the cold, the flu, the virus, in the most helpful, healthful way. And also to make sure that the infection gets completely processed and exits your system. Where we're going a little bit wrong is that by subduing the symptoms, we're actually creating what we call in traditional Chinese medicine a lot of like lingering pathogens. So you eventually make it through because you're built to survive. The immune system is built to navigate these circumstances. But if you subdue the process of the immune system with all of these funny drugs and pharmaceuticals, it's likely that some part of that process goes unfulfilled. And so the part where you might be uncomfortable is that maybe for a day or two, you have a stuffy nose and you need to slow down and you need to rest and you need to get in bed and you need to eat soup and you need to drink tea. And it doesn't feel that comfortable, but you're honoring the fact that your immune system is working overtime to rid your body of an offender. And when we suppress the immune system's efforts and we keep going, We're more or less just saying like, right, this is the Italian, I don't think I can say it on a webinar, but for those of you who have visited Italy, we're like, whatever, buddy, screw you. That doesn't seem like a very respectful way to embrace this precious privilege of being alive. And so, yes, we need to get comfortable being uncomfortable. When you feel sad, it's uncomfortable. When you feel angry, it's uncomfortable. But until we allow ourselves to feel these things, and until we honor that there are some processes that are better to move through than to try to erase or subdue, we're going to remain stuck in states of dis-ease. And so a couple general practices that I'd love to kind of leave you with. One, limit device use. Really, the devices, boy, guys, they're really energy suckers. And I say this with a lot of love because right now my life is completely reliant upon devices and I feel it. I'm grateful on one hand that I can connect with my community and help so many people. And on the other hand, I feel my system reaching a limit going, this is not sustainable, right? Because these things, as wonderful as they might be, there's always good and there's always bad to everything, right? But we need to start limiting some of the exposure, not only for the exposure to the waves and all of the other things, but also if you think about it, like think about how overwhelming life can feel emotionally anyway. And then you go and scroll on Instagram and you watch a story that makes you happy, then you watch a story that makes you cry, and then you watch a story that like be political, and then you watch a story, and in a half an hour or maybe even 5 minutes, you could go through 30 different emotions. You think that's good for your system? Of course not, right? So really making a conscientious effort to limit device use and connect with your humans. And if there aren't humans close, maybe connecting with animals, maybe even sometimes better than connecting with humans, depending on who the humans are that are closest to you in this moment. And then again, supplementing intelligently. This used to be low down on the list for me, but it just keeps creeping its way up because of the nature and the state of the world. If most of us would just for a little while take a good multivitamin, things would start to shift. If only that, I'm sure of it. Because we're all malnourished. We're overfed and malnourished, like in every sense, right? Overfed information, totally malnourished by information. Overfed food-wise, but malnourished. And so supplementing intelligently has made its way to the second tier of my list of general practices. Then, of course, that doesn't replace eating a whole foods, local, primarily plant-based, organic, if you can, diet is going to be so helpful in addition to giving yourself that foundational nourishment. Reduce toxins to the best of your ability in every area of your life: environment, personal care, food, beverage, cleaning products, cosmetics, shampoo, in the bathroom, so many places that you can ditch and switch for something natural, less toxic, and therefore less disease contributing. Learn and practice mindfulness exercises. This is a huge one, and it really leans into that being comfortable with discomfort. Where we want to go is to a place where we're so in tune with the present moment that we can feel and understand when something begins to shift for the challenging. A lot of our troubles come because we've been taught to endure and just, like muscle through it and it's okay. And we go and we go and we go until the body just collapses because we've missed all of the signals along the way telling us, like, hey, there's an issue. We have to relearn how to listen to our experience neurologically, with the brain, sensationally. And the one pathway back to this is mindfulness. It could be through yoga, it could be through meditation, it could be through mindfulness courses. It doesn't have to look any one way. We're all different people, so our portals are going to be a little bit different. But you must dedicate some time to learning and cultivating and then practicing mindfulness pieces somehow. Spending time in nature. We're nature. Everyone knows it. Even if you live in a city, the minute your feet touch the grass or you stand under a tree, you feel better. Why? Because those are your people. That is our natural environment, nature. And so get as much exposure to nature as possible. Go to bed and wake up at the same time. Sleep, intelligence, really necessary. Reconnect again and again with your why. Remember not to be too influenced by what everyone else is telling you is good, that, this, that, what you should believe, what you should prioritize. Get still. Get a hold of your mindfulness practices and return again and again to asking yourself, what is it all about for me? And acting from that point. And then what I always love to remind you is that whatever you do, whatever you choose, wherever you start, however small, however big, it doesn't matter, right? You don't have to do it all at once. Start in one small place. Whatever you do, do your best not to cause harm to others. And what you start to see is that by choosing like non-toxic things instead of toxic things, you start to contribute to the well-being of the earth, depending on what products you're choosing or how you're choosing to do that, instead of the degradation of the earth, right? So there are so many layers of this, but do your best not to take your frustration out on others, not to cause harm to others in the process. Take responsibility for yourself, reach out for assistance and guidance, and begin to make the changes that will return you to your birthright of being harmonious. And one last little formula, right? Identify an action that is needed or that you want, or an action. Nope, that is a little mistype. So identify where an intervention is what that should say is needed, right? Identify where an intervention is needed. And again, it could be small. It could be like, well, I saw the statistics and I know we're all malnourished, so I'm going to prioritize getting my hands on a vitamin, and I can tell you which ones I love. You can respond to the email that I'll share the replay of. Choose an action and stay with that action for at least 3 months. It's another downfall of our modern society, the velocity, the amount of information. We don't stick with things. We try it. We think maybe after a day or two we understand its potency. We don't. Whether it's synthetic, whether it's natural, whether it's anything, 3 months minimum to begin to have an understanding of what type of influence it's having on you. And then a couple of opportunities to dive deeper. On May 18th, I'm starting a 5-week program that's a deep dive into traditional Chinese medicine. So if you're more inclined into the emotional, spiritual integration of the physical, this might be a great place for you to look, or a foundational wellness immersion that's starting on May 26th that is going to introduce just some foundational supplements that we hold in place for 30 days in collaboration with a series of live Zooms with me to kind of take apart and look at with more dedication many of the topics that are important for us: holistic medicine, inflammation, the microbiome, digestion, just taking a deep dive into some of these categories to help educate and empower you more deeply. And then my favorite reminder is simply that the grass is greener where you water it. So even if you let your mind, move into rumination about all of this, like that's where your energy goes. And so if you're not sure where to start, please reach out, or reach out to a community that you know, and if not me, someone, right? And start to get guidance. But wherever your mind goes is where the energy flows, and the grass is going to grow where your energy flows. And so be really sweetly aware of what's happening for you and what choices you're wanting to make, and make them. Okay. All right. So that's it for us today. I hope that the webinar was informative. I hope that it gives you food for thought. I know it was a lot of information and probably a lot to chew on depending on where you are in your journey. But again, please reach out, take a look at my website, connect with me if you're wanting to glide into any of the experiences. I've really dedicated a good part of my work to creating and holding these 4 and 5-week courses, because it's a way that I can help you to feel a sense of follow through and really hold us into a pattern that becomes a positive habit and gives us time to explore what it all means depending on the topic. So jump in, reach out, inquire. If you know someone in your life who could benefit from hearing this when you get the replay, please share. And I will see you somewhere on down the road.